Okay, folks, I want to show you the online platform for USPNF because once I do, you're going to be like, hey, that's convenient. And then as we begin to use it, you're going to go, hey, that's awful. I wish I didn't know that information. So here is USPNF/PF. And it's just a pharmaceutical formulary, if you want to think of it that way, or pharmacopoeia formulary, whatever floats your boat. That's what you can use for PF. But here is the online platform. Just visiting USPNF.com. But you're going to have a username and password in order to access this website, which you do not have because you've got to pay a pretty penny to have online access to this version of the USP. So with the help of local business partners, thank you. You know who you are if you're one of those. We are able to purchase online access to the pharmacopoeia databases, and we can pull these various monographs that we need to use throughout the semester or throughout the program because we see it more in just only 114. All right, so one of the first things that I just want you to become familiar with is the launch page of the USPNF once you log in, and that's what you're seeing here on the screen. So up here in the top left-hand corner, if I click there, there's a couple of options that I can choose from, and really right now, I'm going to talk to you like you were a user of a monograph and you needed to do some testing on a certain particular item that was submitted to the lab, and I'll show you how to go in and search this and find the things that you need in order to accomplish those laboratory tasks. But I do want to start off, before I'll show you that, with under the menu item, there is this area called a general chapter. And the general chapters, if I click that, are broken down into different categories. Notice one says general test and assays, and this is 1 through 999. And then general information 1000 to 1999. And then dietary supplements, which are 2000 to 2999. So there's going to be moments when we do some of these monographs throughout the semester that's going to refer to a general chapter. And I want to kind of put in perspective of what that actually is before we see that or before we go further and further into the semester. So for instance, let's say that one of my testing requirements for that product is a melting point. And I don't know how to do a melting point. Let's say I've never done that before at all in my life. So in the document, it's going to refer to the melting point and the types of things that they want you to do and want you to follow as you do this particular test. Where they're going to give me a number that's located within a bracket. I'm going to call that a bracket. So that number is going to be in reference to how to do that test the proper way according to USPNF guidelines. So if I click this general test and assays and I go into that category, once I get the number, that's the key thing, I've got to get that number first. But once I get the number, I can go in here and just do a general kind of overview. And look, it says 1 to 20, 21 to 50, 51 to 80, 81 to 180, chemical test and assays, and then it says 601 to 999 physical test and determinations. Well, the call letter that I've got in that testing document is going to tell me what I need to look for. So I'll click the appropriate thing and I can scroll down and I'm going to find 741, and that's the number that's given to me in the document. And here is melting range or temperature. So if you did not know how to do this, then you can at least click that link, and that link will pull up some background information on what 741 is all about. What are they referring to? What are they telling you to do? What are the proper steps? What are the things for me to actually record? These are kind of guidelines or procedures that I need to follow when I do that particular test. So that's just one of many. And normally what happens here is that if they give me this bracket 741 or general chapter 741, then they are going to do it with every single document that we pull from the USPNF, because many things require a melting point, right? So what will often happen is that they'll say you need to do a melting point, General Chapter 741, and then you can recall that 741 by going in online or pulling up this document, reading about it, jogging your memory, figuring out how to do that particular test. So for instance, I could have 20 things in the lab. Each one will have its own document that I have to complete. Each one has its own set of tests that I have to do for it. And out of those 20, there could be 10 that will have a melting range or temperature that's associated there. So instead of including those directions over and over and over and over and over in all of these documents, what they do is that they just simply say General Chapter 741 melting range or temperature, and that is it. That's all that you get. So you get no procedure, you get no directions, because that procedure and those directions are going to be located within the General Chapter 741 that is generally used for most of the things that are submitted to the laboratory. If there's anything kind of oddball about that particular product, then they will tell you that in that document, but they will often refer to these general chapters, and hence that's why they're called that. All right, so for instance, another one that we might see is General Chapter 731, and 731 is all about loss on drying. So this idea that a substance could have some moisture, and we need to dry that moisture off. So I'm going to take that product, I'm probably going to heat it, and I'm probably going to put it in the oven, or I'm going to put it in the desiccator. Well, it's not going to give you any of those directions in the actual product or raw ingredient document. They are just simply going to refer, and they're going to say, go to General Chapter 731. So I'm going to key in 731 online, and I'm going to see a lot of information on how to do that particular procedure. Something else that you're seeing on my screen right now is this kind of documentation tracking that they are putting into the online database that makes it very easy. So a lot of the highlighted areas that you see here on the screen, these are probably recent changes. Now, these changes are not going to be happening like yesterday, and these changes are also maybe sometimes changed maybe 1 or 2 years ago, but they are what they would call recent changes or modifications to the general chapter, and they're highlighting it to let you know, hey, pay attention here, please, because if you've done this test over and over and over for years, we could have did something a little bit different this time around that slightly modifies that procedure for you and maybe make it better or maybe make it worse. And we hope it's better every single time or easier every single time, but they do constantly update these on a rotating basis. And very often these changes, if you take a look, it's like, oh, well, let's see, let's rephrase this area. So under the condition specified, comma, and then I see a triangle that tells me where the change began, which is defined as loss on drying value, and then triangle. So that addition, that phrase has been added into the wording, and that phrase looks like it was added by the USP on August the 1st, 2020. So they also do a very good documentation practice, just like we would have to do in a company if we were modifying or changing SOPs, because that's kind of what this is. So if we've got to do it, why can't they do it? And they should, and they do. So that's what you're seeing. All of the highlighting areas are recent changes that have taken place just probably within the past couple of years on LOD. All right. There's also an easier way to kind of get to what you need. So, you don't have to go and scour through. So again, up here at the menu, you go to general chapters and you go into general test and assays. That's where a lot of these are going to be located. And then you just kind of click the window of numbers that you need to pull from, and then that will allow you to kind of find what you're searching for. Or up here at the very top under the general search bar, I can just simply type in 741. And then up here at the very top, notice it has this bracket around 741. It just automatically populates because it thinks that's probably what I want. And then I can hit that link and it searches. And there's all of these, like anything dealing with 741 is probably going to show up. But at the same time, here's General Chapter 741. And it says General Chapter right below that, but it's melting range or temperature. So that might be a quicker way for me to find what I'm looking for within the online database. Next up, let's take a look. Like, why would thymol or hydrogenated vegetable oil? Let's go to this one. Why would hydrogenated vegetable oil show up in this search that I just did for loss on drying? So here is this term called monograph. I see that right below that name and that link. And monograph means the test document. So this is the think of it as the SOP or all of the testing that should go along with hydrogenated vegetable oil. So that is what we term a monograph. And the monograph will outline all of the tests that I have to do on hydrogenated vegetable oil. That monograph would be the document that would refer to these general chapters. So if it's a common test, that's where I'm going to find 741, go do it, 731, go do it, and so forth. So why would hydrogenated vegetable oil show up in a 741 search? Well, I can click this link and the what we call monograph now will show up that I'm seeing on the computer screen. And as I go through, it's going to say identification, add the following. There's a change there. So here is a test that we have to do for that. And then it says add the following. B, it meets the requirements for melting range or temperature 741. So that means that these monographs or testing documents probably had at least listed melting range or temperature as part of that monograph requirement. So that's why some of these names were showing up for you, because it probably was included in the testing document. What's also nice and convenient is that, let's say that I was given hydrogenated vegetable oil. Think of like, I can't believe it's not butter. Isn't that hydrogenated vegetable oil? I mean, it's vegetable oil that has been turned from a liquid to a solid by a chemical reaction, and they put food coloring in it to make it look like butter when it's not really butter. It's hydrogenated vegetable oil. Next time you go get I cannot believe it's not butter. It's not butter, and it's because it's just simply vegetable oil that they have converted into a solid, or a semi-solid if you want to think of it that way. So what's nice about this is that everything is hyperlinked. Back in the day, it used not to be this way. We had to cross-reference all of these textbooks, typically in a library type of setting. Go find this manually, go look at this manually, look that up in a different book, make photocopies of this. But now everything is nice and convenient and clickable through hyperlinks. So again, if I was doing identification and I need it to do melting range or temperature and I've never done this before, then I would see it meets the requirements for, and then it tells me what that is. It gives me the general chapter number, but it also gives me the link that I can just click on simply, and then those directions that are associated with that particular test will show up, and I don't have to search for anything. So very often as a user, what I normally do is I go in here and type in the name of the substance that we need to do the testing for. So here, hydrogenated vegetable oil. When that hydrogenated vegetable oil shows up, I'll click the monograph, which is all of the pieces and parts that we have to do for the testing to be completed. And then anything that I don't really know, anything I'm not sure on, any procedure that might be new, it's going to be listed, and there's probably a guaranteed hyperlink that I can follow for that. All right, as we go on down, here's loss on drying, and here's general chapter 731. So again, a clickable link, and it will take me to 731, and I can read more information about it. However, here it says the analysis, it's made some extra statements, and it says, hey, dry the sample at 105 for 4 hours. So that could mean that if we're not very careful and we're not paying attention to the testing document, which is the monograph will override the general chapter. So if the general chapter says dried at 110 for 3 hours and then remove it, that's what we do most of the time. I mean, if nothing else is listed here, that's what we follow. But because there's a statement here that says dry the sample at 105 for 4 hours, then I want to make sure that I'm following this, because this is the test document for the particular stuff that I'm working with. So if there's any slight modification to that general chapter, this is where you're going to find it. So you need to follow the monograph if it tells you otherwise. The general chapter does not override those particular times, those particular temperatures, and so forth. Next up, it says fats and fixed oils. Whatever 401 is, right? We maybe have never done 401, but here's fats and fixed oils 401. All right, so the sample here, there's a statement, and it says you need 20 grams in the conical flask. There is a chance that when I go to 401, it will tell me a recommended sample size. And that recommended sample size will be appropriate for most everything. However, in this case, it might not be. So they are specifically stating 20 grams into a flask, and that's what you'll need for this test to take place. Next up, it says the analysis. Melt the sample in a steam bath. Add 100 ml of hot alcohol. Neutralize with 0.1 normal sodium hydroxide to phenolphthalein TS. Swirl. Add 1 ml of phenolphthalein TS. Titrate with 0.1 normal sodium hydroxide until the solution remains pink after being shaken for 15 seconds. The acceptance criteria is not more than 4.0. So there's a couple of things here that we want to pay attention to. NMT always means not more than. That is the abbreviation that they use for acceptance criteria very often. So NMT, not more than. Additionally, you will find an NLT, and the NLT means not less than. So one is a maximum and one is a minimum. So not more than 4. So anything 4 and below, we're good. But if that had NLT 4, that means not less than 4. So that means 4 and above, we are good. So those are the 3 letter abbreviations of NMT and NLT. Notice the loss on drying also had it as well, not more than 0.1%. So that means there should be very little moisture in this product as it's submitted to the laboratory in order for this thing to pass with a USP approved stamp. So not more than 0.1%. All right, so pretty short here, right? I mean, that looks very simple, very easy, but there's a lot of references to 401, and if I click 401, because maybe we've never done that before, we do it in the program though, but if I look at 401, then, oh gosh, that's where all of this stuff is hidden. It's not actually in the monograph, it's in the general chapter. So good luck to you. I'll see you in a few days if you had to do 401. But it goes through the processes of different methods, different material, different kind of processes. Anytime that you use a fat or fixed oil, these are typically the testing that comes along with that. Notice it also says melting temperature here. The melting temperature, determine the melting temperature as directed for class 2. So that means I need to pay attention to what class 2 is all about. Is this the normal way that we do melting point in a laboratory, or is this like an oddball way of how we do melting point? Well, let's find out. So we need to reference class 2 because it tells me that. And it says, listen, if you need to know more information about melting temperature or range, click here. So I'll click that, and then I'll scroll down and I'll see class 1s and class 1s and class 1s. And then here I see class 2. And it says carefully melt the material. So I'm going to take my, I can't believe it's not butter, and I'm going to melt it in the lab as low a temperature as possible and draw it into a capillary tube, which is open at both ends. So I'm going to take this, I can't believe it's not butter, and I'm going to put my capillary tube on the inside, and it's going to suck up some of that sample to a depth of about 10 millimeters. Cool the charged tube at 10 degrees. So I'm probably going to put it in the refrigerator maybe for at least 1 day. Or put it in an ice bath for 2 hours. Then attach the tube to a thermometer by suitable means, and adjust it in a water bath so that the upper edge of the material is 10 millimeters below the water, and then heat as directed in class 1. So no, this is not really a regular melting point process that we would do in a lab. And the reason is because it looks like this semi-solid material has to be heated up first we've got to melt it first, then we've got to suck that liquid up into a capillary, then we've got to cool it to turn it back into a solid, and then we've got to do the melting point analysis for it. So this is a slightly kind of odd process, but this is the process that's appropriate for hydrogenated vegetable oil, and that is what it referenced to in what we call the monograph piece. All right. So that gives you kind of a general idea of what we need to do, or what we need to kind of find in the USPNF within the monographs, and with our nice little different ways that we can search, especially the general chapters that we were after. So again, general chapters broken down by numbers, and those general chapters are going to be provided to you in what we call the monographs. The monographs are the individual testing documents that we use for various material. So here we see a USP section, and we see an NF section, and we see a dietary supplement section. So if I click on the USP, these are really directly associated to the USP. These were associated to the NF before these two companies began to merge. So that's why they are often listing them a little bit separately. So NF National Formulary. All right, so within the USP, if I click that, then it's all going to be listed in alphabetical order. I mean, look at this. I mean, it's just tons of stuff. I'm still scrolling, and I'm still in the A's, and we've got the entire alphabet to go through. So no one wants to kind of do this. And let's say that someone submitted salt to the laboratory, and we've got to do the USP testing on salt. So the easiest way, which is sodium chloride, by the way. So the easiest way is to go up here to the top in the general search bar and type in sodium chloride. And what happens is that anything that has sodium chloride that's associated with it will typically pop up, just like it did with the general chapters of melting point when we searched for it. So I'm just going to do the very top one, just a general search here for sodium chloride, and then a bunch of different things kind of show up here, right? But notice as I go down, I see actually sodium chloride listed as one of my choices, typically up at the very top. And here is the monograph, right? I see that word monograph, which means that this is the actual testing document that I need to follow when we do the testing on sodium chloride in a laboratory. So here's the monograph that pulls up with all of the testing information, and it references again, hey, identification test, general, bracket 191. So that means general test 191 sodium. So what that actually is going to do is it's going to give me the hyperlink. I've never done this test before. Let's pretend I've not, but you will, because that's part of a program. So if I click that link, it's going to pull up General Chapter 191 that they are calling identification test. But notice there's tons of things that are listed here in alphabetical order. The only one it said was comma, sodium. That was it. So I'm going to scroll down until I get to the sodium piece, and here it is. And it says sodium. This is how you do the test. Unless otherwise specified in a monograph, prepare a solution to contain 0.1 gram of the sodium compound in 2 mils of water. Add 2 mils of 15% potassium carbonate and heat to boiling. No precipitate should form. Add 4 mils of potassium pyroantimonate, TS, and heat to boiling. Allow to cool in ice water. And if necessary, rub the inside of the test tube with a glass rod. A dense precipitate is formed. So those are the directions that I would follow in order to complete that one little line for identification A, general 191 sodium. Notice it doesn't tell me otherwise in the monograph. It doesn't tell me any additional information. It doesn't tell me measure out a different amount, measure out a different volume, use a different... It doesn't tell me anything. It just says go to 191 and do it. So whatever is listed in 191, that's what I would follow in the general chapter. Now, B says chloride. Doesn't really give me a hyperlink, then that means down here below, this is what I need to follow. There's no hyperlink for me to click. There's nothing for me to reference to. This is the test, and I follow that test direction as it's written. Okay. The other thing I want to kind of show you, if I go back, when we search the sodium chloride monograph, notice there was a sodium chloride up here that says reagents. That is another area of the USP that we often find ourselves playing around in. And the reagent category is reagents that are needed for various tests throughout the monographs. So in other words, if I click the sodium chloride that says reagents right here, and I click that hyperlink, it's going to give me, boom, there you go. Whenever a lab tells you use sodium chloride, you want to make sure that you use sodium chloride with the following category number, chemical abstract number, and use ACS reagent grade. And if I don't use ACS reagent grade, I'm in violation already. So they are telling me an insight to the purity of that particular reagent or solution that I need to use while I do the USP test. So that is the purpose of the reagent section of the USPNF. It will tell me straight up what I need or how I need to make it. All right, so for instance, here is a sodium chloride solution. So if I pull up a monograph and I'm reading directions and it says using a sodium chloride solution, well, what is that? Like, how strong is it? How much do I need? Blah, blah, blah. Like, what do I need to go by? Well, this is going to be found in the reagent category. So here's a link to that. Sodium chloride solution. And there's a reagent. I see that reagent classification. So I click it. And it says use saline TS. Pfft, what's that going to do me? So if I click saline TS, oh, finally here we get a recipe. Dissolve 9 grams of salt in water to make 1,000 mils. That's exactly what we need to do. So this is a recipe guide, and it tells me exactly how many grams to weigh out. It tells me how much volume to dissolve it in. It gives me any little tips or tricks that I need to do in order to make that solution. But that is the purpose of the reagent section or reference tables within the USPNF, right? Now, I'm going to go back to the monograph for sodium chloride. So here I told you this is normally where I start. I type in the word of something that we're trying to do the testing for. The monograph pulls up, and then I've got all of these little hyperlinks here that reference me to what I need. But everything, including those recipes, folks, are included in the monograph as well. So for instance, as I scroll through, I'm going to see a couple of different things here. And look, it says, moisten the sample by the dropwise addition of a freshly prepared mixture of 0.15 mils of sodium nitrate solution, 100 mils per, or 100 milligrams per milliliter. So this is kind of giving me a recipe right here, right? Oh, excuse me. That's giving me a recipe right there. So that's great. I can use that to go by. I just scale it up to however much I need. I probably need more than 1 milliliter. So if I need to prepare 50 mils, I just take 100 milligrams times 50, and that will tell me how many milligrams to weigh out for that 50 mil solution. The sodium nitrite, if I didn't know what sodium nitrite was, I can click that hyperlink, and it tells me NaNO2 is sodium nitrite. And then it says use ACS reagent grade. So I need to make sure that I'm picking the appropriate versions of these reagents as I begin to prepare these solutions with. All right. Next up, if we go back down to kind of where we were, sodium nitrite is right there. The next says of 1 normal sulfuric acid and 25 mils of iodide-free starch TS. What on earth is that? Well, I could probably order it from a chemical supplier, but if I didn't want to order it and if I thought that I had the stuff to make it and I could make it, then I click that hyperlink. And guess what? We are in the reagents and reference tables, and it is yet again another recipe, and it tells me exactly what to do. Mix 1 gram of soluble starch with cold water to make a really thin paste. While stirring, add 100 mils of boiling water. Prepare the solution immediately before use. And iodide-free starch, TS, shows a blue color when 20 mils of a potassium iodide solution, blah, 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 are added to it. So this, again, is a recipe that is laid out. It's very specific. I follow the directions because they don't want you to mess these things up. Very often there's no math work. Very often there's no molarity calculations. Very often there's no dilution calculations. It is you follow the directions, you measure it out, you weigh it out, you dissolve it like they tell you, and you call it a day. So very little think work in all of this information that happens here. Here's another one, limit of bromides, blah, 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 blah. At 2 mils of pH 4.7 phenol red TS. Okay, well, what is that stuff? So I'll click it, and I'm back in the reagents and reference tables, and it says to make this, you dissolve 33 milligrams of phenol sulfonphthalein in 1.5 mils of 2 normals sodium hydroxide solution, dilute with water, mix, blah, 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 blah. Check it with a pH probe and get it to a 4.7. So that's exactly what goes on with the reagents and the reference tables. And again, that's why I start with the monograph first. So train of thought for me, pull up all the testing that's going to be required, skim it, see what's there. If I'm not really certain on a particular type of test that's included, then those are hyperlinked, so that way I can click them and reference to that procedure. If I'm not really necessarily sure on what kind of reagent that they're talking about, click it. That will take you to the reagent section, and they will tell you how to make it, or they will tell you what's going to be required for you to complete this particular types of test. So as I go through, all of these are hyperlinked for information that I need as a user. Even folks, look, here's instrumental conditions, fluorescence spectroscopy. So even with fluorescence, if I've never used a fluorimeter, maybe I can go in and click this link, and it will tell me how to do that particular task, what to watch out for, the things that I need to do to make sure that machine's working, blah and blah. I mean, that is the purpose of the monograph, which is why I continue to say I start here first. All right. Okay, so I think that gives you a little bit of layout of the land. So the idea of a monograph, which is the document that includes all the testing, and then the idea of what we call the general chapters. And the general chapters are just general procedures that are used over and over and over throughout many things, and they are all kind of categorized. They have a number. We can reference those. And then we've also talked a little bit about the reagents and the reference tables. So how do I make the reagents, indicators, and solutions that are required for the monograph, and then any of the other things that are going to be associated with those particular tests. So I can go through here and do what I did with the monograph or general chapter. I can go into reagents and indicators and solutions. And then when I do that, look at this. There's going to be a reagent category, and it is just like tons of stuff. Or I can simply click up here, and let's say that they want me to use a hydrochloric acid VS. I don't know. So let me just type it in. Hydrochloric acid VS. And I just hit enter. And then as I go through, I'm going to see different links, and I can find what that lab document really was referencing. So here is a 0.5 HCl-VS in methanol. Here's a 0.02 HCl-VS, a 1 HCl-VS, a 0.1 HCl-VS, a 0.1 alcoholic HCl-VS. So you just go through, find what you need. When you do find something that you need, click it, and it will tell you exactly how to make that solution. So it says dilute 8.5 milliliters of hydrochloric acid with water to 1,000 mils. So in other words, they did the dilution calculation for you. They took hydrochloric acid, they know that typical strength, and then they calculated through dilution, MV equals MV or CV equals CV. They went through the dilution equation, how many mils would be needed to make 1,000 mils of a 0.1 normal solution. And they did that math, and they are telling you measure 8.5 mils. So again, no math required. You click the links, it tells you exactly how to make the stuff, and we take all of the molarity and the dilution calculations for granted because they've done it for me. Not only that, but I have to standardize it. So it gives me the standardization procedure, and this is to let me know that I made that hydrochloric acid solution the proper way. That's what this is all about. All right. Okay, so I think that's where this video is going to stop. We'll dig a little bit deeper in other monographs in the next video that I've got for you on USPNF, but I think this gives you a very good general overview of what is here. Also, up at the very top right-hand side of this, see this link that says Reference Materials? I can click that, and then it says to see a complete list of USP reference standards, go here. So if I click that link, that will take me to what they call the USP store. And anytime these monographs or anytime I have to validate or calibrate a piece of instrumentation, they will often say you need a USP standard in order to do this. And this is where you would find that. All right, so for instance, let's say that I am working with aspirin and I need a USP standard for aspirin in the lab as I do the test. So I'm going to click this aspirin link. I want you to think about a bottle of aspirin in the store. So an entire bottle that has, you know, who knows, 50 to 100 tablets, maybe more in them of aspirin, probably going to cost you, what, a couple of dollars, if even that. But along with that aspirin, there's aspirin on the inside of those tablets that you swallow. But in the laboratory environment, I would be testing that aspirin tablet. Not a big deal. Those are cheap. I can get them, crush them up, do what I need to do with them, make them pass, make them fail, right? But in that discussion, we're going to have quality aspirin to compare our results against and standards to use. And if I take a look at this, 500 milligrams of aspirin. Folks, that is about the quantity, double the quantity maybe of what's in an aspirin tablet. I think a baby aspirin is about 80 milligrams. I think that a adult aspirin tablet carries with it about 200 to 250 milligrams. So this is about 2 tablets here. And we're going to end up paying $283 for that. Okay, $283 for 500 milligrams of material. But it is that expensive because these are very high purity reagents that we are using in a lab. And they have to go under scrutinization all over the place in order to get that USP approval. So that way, when you get these, you know that you are using USP grade stuff in the testing portion of the laboratory procedures. And this gives you the standards to go by in order to compare your results to what they would classify as a standard result. So it gives you an idea of the money that is tied up in the standards here that we begin to use in these monographs and in the testing on a daily basis. And 500 milligrams, it's not going to last a long time. Depending on the types of tests and depending on how many, this is not going to last a long time at all before we have to order another 500 milligrams or 2 tablets for $283. So kind of depressing, but that's the way that the system's built, and this is what we would call the USP store. All right. Okay, so with that said, I will end the video finally here. 38 minutes of just a review of what is here as far as the USP online platform. Over here on the right-hand side, you do see a option to print, and you do see an option to email it to yourself as well. But it's pretty basic, and it's very user-friendly in order to find really what you need. So stay tuned in the next video. We'll pick up from here. We'll dissect a monograph a little bit more, and we'll probably finish up the USP monograph section